It was supposed to be just another evening in New York City. Crowded streets glowing with neon signs, soft jazz spilling from open cafe doors, and a restless wind brushing against the glass of Maribel's, a small, candlelit restaurant tucked away in a quiet corner of Brooklyn. But for Ethan Cole, that evening would change everything he thought he knew about fate, forgiveness, and second chances. He sat by the window, adjusting the collar of his navy blue shirt, the one his sister had ironed for him that morning. It wasn't often he went on dates, and tonight, he was trying something new, a blind date set up by his friend Marcus, who insisted he needed to stop living like a ghost. But as the clock ticked past 7:45 and the woman he was supposed to meet never arrived, Ethan began to wonder if this was just another reminder of how unlucky he was when it came to love, or life in general. Before we continue, if you believe in kindness, destiny, and second chances, please like this video, subscribe to Hopeful Stories, and share it with someone who needs a little hope today. Leave a comment below. Tell us if you've ever had life surprise you in the most unexpected way. Ethan's fingers traced the rim of his coffee cup, his thoughts drifting back to the last time he'd truly felt loved. 3 years ago, he'd lost his fiancée, Lily, in a tragic car accident on the same day he had planned to propose. The necklace he'd meant to give her, a small gold pendant engraved with the words, "Always Yours," had disappeared that night too. For months, he searched everywhere, clinging to the foolish hope that somehow finding it would bring her back to him. Eventually, he gave up, but the loss of that necklace had always haunted him, like an unfinished sentence in the story of his life. As he glanced at his reflection in the window, he realized how tired he looked, his eyes carrying the weight of sleepless nights, his smile forced, his heart half alive. The world outside blurred with the soft drizzle that had begun to fall, streaking the glass like tears. He sighed, thinking he'd stay just 5 more minutes before leaving. After all, how long could a man keep waiting for someone who might never come? And then, just as he began to gather his things, the restaurant door opened with a gust of cold air. A woman stepped in, her face hidden behind a curtain of damp hair. She looked lost, almost broken, her hands trembling as she clutched something small wrapped in a handkerchief. The hostess greeted her, but she didn't respond. Her eyes scanned the room until they landed on Ethan. For a moment, they just stared at each other, her gaze filled with confusion, his with curiosity. Then she began to walk toward him, slow and hesitant, as if her feet were unsure whether to move forward or turn back. When she reached his table, she stopped, tears already streaming down her cheeks. Without saying a word, she placed the handkerchief on the table and unwrapped it. Inside lay a small, gold necklace, the same one Ethan had lost 3 years ago. Ethan froze, his chest tightened, breath catching in disbelief. It couldn't be. The pendant gleamed softly under the restaurant's warm lights, its engraving still visible, "Always Yours." His hands trembled as he touched it, as if afraid it would vanish again. He looked up at the woman, his voice unsteady. Where did you find this?" Her lips quivered. She took a deep breath before speaking. Her name was Claire, and 3 years ago, she had been driving home late from work when her car broke down near the intersection where an accident had happened that same night. She'd rushed toward the wreck, hoping to help, but when the ambulance arrived, they told her it was too late for the woman in the car. On the ground, near the shattered glass, she'd found the necklace. She picked it up, planning to turn it in, but in the chaos, she never got the chance. Life had spiraled for her after that. Her mother fell sick. She lost her job, and guilt consumed her every time she looked at the pendant. She didn't even know who it belonged to until 2 weeks ago, when she found an old online article about Lily's accident. The photo in the article showed Lily wearing the same necklace. Claire said she had cried for hours, realizing she had held onto another person's last piece of love. Tonight, she'd come hoping to return it to Lily's fiancé, the man she now realized was Ethan. Ethan listened, speechless. The restaurant's soft music seemed to fade into silence. Everything around him slowed down, the flicker of candlelight, the sound of rain outside, the trembling breath of the woman sitting across from him. She had carried his pain without knowing it, and now she was here, giving it back. When she finally finished speaking, she whispered, "I'm so sorry. I should have come sooner. I didn't mean to hold on to something that wasn't mine." Ethan shook his head slowly. "No," he said softly, "you didn't hold on to it. You kept it safe until I was ready to face it again." The word surprised even him. For years, he'd buried his heart behind grief, shutting the world out. But in that moment, as he looked at Claire's tear-stained face, he realized that maybe this meeting wasn't random. Maybe fate had chosen this night to bring closure, not just for him, but for her too. They sat in silence for a while, both lost in thought. The waiter quietly refilled their glasses and left them alone. Outside, the rain grew heavier, washing the city streets clean. Something inside Ethan began to feel lighter too, as if the storm he'd carried for years was finally breaking apart. Claire wiped her tears, embarrassed. "I didn't mean to intrude. You were probably waiting for someone." Ethan looked down at the empty chair across from him and gave a faint smile. "Maybe I was waiting for you." She looked up, startled. But there was no flirtation in his tone, just sincerity. A quiet acceptance that life sometimes rewrote its own stories in ways no one could predict. As they talked, Ethan learned that Claire had been through her own battles. Her mother's illness, her failed engagement, the loneliness that followed. She admitted she hadn't laughed freely in years. And as she spoke, Ethan saw in her eyes the same pain he'd been living with. The same ache for something lost. The same search for redemption. They talked for hours, forgetting about time. When the restaurant finally closed, Ethan offered to walk her to her car. The rain had slowed to a soft drizzle, the city lights reflecting in puddles like scattered stars. As they reached her car, she hesitated, pulling the necklace from her pocket one last time. "It should be with you," she said. "It belongs to your story." But Ethan gently pushed it back into her hand. "No," he said. "Maybe it's time it starts another story." Tears welled in her eyes again, but this time, they weren't just tears of sorrow. They were tears of release, of healing. For the first time in years, both of them felt something shift inside, a quiet, unexpected peace. Over the next few weeks, they kept in touch. What began as messages of gratitude slowly turned into long conversations that stretched late into the night. They shared stories, fears, and small joys. And somewhere along the way, friendship turned into something deeper. Not because either of them was looking for love, but because they had found understanding. Ethan began to live again. He started painting, something he'd given up after Lily's death. Claire began volunteering at a shelter for women who had lost loved ones in accidents. They helped each other heal, one day at a time. One spring afternoon, 6 months after that night, Ethan invited Claire to Central Park. Beneath a canopy of cherry blossoms, he pulled out a small box. Inside was a new necklace, not gold this time, but silver, simple, elegant. It was engraved with the words, "New Beginnings." He looked at her and said quietly, "This isn't about replacing the past. It's about honoring it by moving forward." Claire couldn't stop the tears from falling as he placed it around her neck. The moment felt like the universe had come full circle. The night she returned a lost piece of love had become the beginning of another. By the time the sun began to set, they sat together on a park bench, watching the sky turn shades of rose and gold. Ethan smiled for the first time in years, not the polite, practiced smile he wore for the world, but one that came from the heart. He realized, then, that sometimes the people who come into our lives unexpectedly are the ones meant to help us heal the most broken parts of ourselves. And that fate, in its mysterious way, doesn't always give us what we want. It gives us what we need. If this story touched your heart, please like, share, and subscribe to Hopeful Stories. Every click helps us spread more light and hope into someone's darkest day. Before you go, comment below. Do you believe people come into our lives for a reason, or just by chance? As night settled over New York and the city lights shimmered like 1,000 tiny miracles, Ethan took one last look at Claire and whispered to himself, maybe the late arrival was never the delay. It was destiny waiting for the right moment. And in that quiet, beautiful stillness, two souls who had once been strangers finally found what they'd both been searching for. Not perfection, Not answers, but peace.